Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Ganz, and I'm really excited to be here to talk to all of you today about moving once more up the stack. We're going to be talking about generative AI and the analytics development lifecycle and the next era of analytics engineering. I'm really thrilled to be here discussing this with you because I have a really interesting lens on the development of analytics as an industry. As the manager of developer experience at DBT Labs, I get to talk to DBT developers and data practitioners from organizations of all size around the world, from the smallest startups to some of the largest organizations in the world, and get to see what problems that they are currently tackling. And I get to see that the problems they're tackling are changing and that the industry is shifting. And this Coalesce, more than any Coalesce in a long time, feels like we are on the cusp of a new shift in the industry. And it's actually bringing me back to a time before I worked at DBT Labs, a time when I was a data practitioner running a data team. And I was introduced to a technology that would not just change my career, but it would actually change the trajectory of the industry. I think many of you are familiar with it. It's called DBT. And as I sat down to plan the talk that I was going to give for Coalesce, the talk that I was going to give was called Practical AI for Analytics Engineers. And that's not the talk that we are going to be walking through today. We're going to be talking about generative AI, and we're going to be talking about how data practitioners are going to see their work change via the application of generative AI and other changes that are coming to the industry. But when I thought about what I wanted to talk to all of you about, it actually was bigger and a little bit more conceptual than just how to think about this one technology. It's how to think about what happens to an industry, what happens to a profession, and what happens to our careers when the technology, the workflow, and the processes that we work with allow us to grow and change in ways that just weren't possible before. And so that's what we'll be walking through today. But it was actually last Friday when I saw this that I found my mascot for the day, because I saw this, and I took it as a challenge. So hold on to this, and we will be coming back to it. But what I want you to think about right now is this concept, moving up the stack. This is one of the core values at DBT Labs, and it's something that has been a part of the DBT identity for a long time. But I gotta be honest, going back and rereading this 6 months ago, it has a very different flavor than it had previous times due to some of the ongoing technological developments in our industry. So we look at this and we see, we believe that all team members should seek to replace themselves. But more than that, we believe that using technology, we can change the work that we do, and we can take things that were previously hard and make them easy. Things that were previously impossible and make them possible. And that by doing so, we open up wide amounts of new opportunity for ourselves. Doing this doesn't mean that there aren't problems left to solve. All it means is that we get to tackle bigger, more interesting, more ambitious problem sets. And so today, I want to walk you through two shifts in the industry. There is the shift that hopefully many of you are familiar with now. It's the one that got us to today. It's the rise of DBT and the rise of analytics engineering. And then there's the next shift. There's the next wave of innovations hitting the industry, and what it's going to mean for all of us as we think about how we plan about our careers and the skill sets that we bring to our organization. It's a big topic, and we're going to hit a lot of different concepts. But I want to start with a story. The year was 2017, and I was running a data team at a mid-sized B2B SaaS startup. It was board meeting season. And as I'm sure many of you in the audience know, board meeting season means it's time to pull metrics, a lot of metrics. And this particular board meeting was different for me because the CEO called me up to his desk and he said, "Hey, Ganz, we're going to have to go a little bit more in-depth this time." And what he meant by more in-depth was he handed me a spreadsheet with about 3,000 data points he wanted me to pull. And these data points were analyses we'd run before. They were new things, but they were things that the board needed to get the meeting done. And so I looked at him and I said, absolutely. I'm not going to come into the office for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to sit at home writing SQL queries for about 12 hours a day. And then when we're done, we're going to work together to figure out how we don't need to do it like this next time we need to solve this problem. Because that was the state of the play in the industry for many of us at this time. Data practitioners, we sat around and we ran queries, and then you would run the query on a repeating basis. You would put it into a spreadsheet. I had my monthly reports, my weekly reports, and there was so much manual work involved that most of my time was spent just running queries. And for organizations, that meant that data transformations were ungoverned and that they were ad hoc. Data lifecycle, the idea that we could actually bring in new data and have it governed like software products, just wasn't even a glimmer on the horizon. And access to data was limited to the few people that had the right knowledge, that had the right systems, that had the right scripts. So after board meeting season, I went and we started a search. And we said, surely there's a better way. And we got introduced to the team at Fishtown Analytics, who had a little tool called DBT. And they introduced us to a couple things. One was the DBT viewpoint, the idea that analytics should be collaborative, that analytics code should be treated like software code, and that we can use cloud data warehouses on top of frameworks like DBT to be able to build our systems, make them more powerful, make them reusable and repeatable. And so I spent the next couple months working with a really fantastic team to take all of the metrics that had been part of our manual process to pull before and put them into a DBT project. This is work that very familiar to many of you in the audience today. And what we found was after just a few months of work, we were able to take all of the metrics that we needed to pull for that famous board meeting that took all this work, and we were able to get them running every single day, tested, version controlled. It just wasn't even a thing to get them pulled. And that is what moving up the stack is. We took something that had been this wild, hard project for me, and then all of a sudden, now it was just easy. It was just part of our day-to-day workflows. And once I had done that, well, it kind of blew my mind. Because I had this, on one hand, this incredible excitement because we were able to do more work. We were able to pull more metrics. There were more interesting analyses that could be done. On the other hand, my entire career up until that point had been being the person that knew how to run these SQL scripts, that knew when to pull them together, that was the one organizationally that had access to these. It was a skill set that I really valued. It made me valued in the organization. And I would be lying to all of you if I said that there wasn't a real sadness as I realized that via this new tool that we had, I didn't think that I was going to be doing that thing anymore. And it's true. That was the last time in my entire career that I did a project where you're running all of your SQL queries, you're pulling it together into an entire a singular spreadsheet. I ended up finding more and new interesting things to do. But there was a feeling of melancholy and loss when I realized that this incredible new tool, it was going to change how I was working moving forward. But I learned that my job wasn't to run SQL queries. It was to build a data product that helped the organization solve problems. And that is a large part of what makes up the day-to-day life of data practitioners today. We moved from a world where your focus is on running queries to a world where your focus is on building data products, on building up these repeatable data sets that allow people around the organization to answer questions, to drive insights, and to work hands-on with their data. And this changed how organizations use data. All across the conference, you'll be hearing about organizations who have used these technologies to create data workflows that were systematized and governed. But we weren't all the way there yet, because there's still no industry best practices around managing data life cycles. And then on getting value from data, it's definitely better. And there's definitely more wide access to data, but it's still difficult at scale. It can still be challenging. But the key thing about this era, and the key thing about this shift, was one of the things that Tristan told me right when I was getting started learning DBT. And he told me that DBT lets you solve hard problems once. And then once you solve that problem, you can go on to focusing on other problems. That is what moving up the stack is. And this meaningfully changed data work for practitioners around the world. You probably remember this slide from the keynote yesterday, where Tristan was talking about how over in the bottom right, this is the challenges facing analytics engineers and data practitioners. And in the bottom right is building transformations for data sets. That is a wild change. It's really different than how things used to be. And via the knowledge creation and sharing of people in this room, the ecosystem partners, the DBT community, we've really changed that over the past 8 years or so. So we're all done, right? We can all pack it up, go home. This can be the last Coalesce. Absolutely not, because when we talk to data practitioners, there's just a lot more work than that to do. We were able to make meaningful progress on one of the biggest challenges that data practitioners face today, but there's more work. And so that is a lot of what we're talking about at this Coalesce. It's the handoff of the DBT viewpoint to the analytics development lifecycle, where we're taking the initial set of challenges that were tackled, and we're expanding it out. We're once again taking the concepts from the software world, the software development lifecycle that people use to build global scale systems, powering the most complicated workflows in the world. And we're saying, how do we apply that to analytics? How do we make it so that we can have trusted data that works all across the lifecycle? Not just building transformations, but from the first step of asking a question to then building out your data transformations, testing, deploying, observing, governing, accessing. The analytics development lifecycle is our first attempt to say, here's a holistic framework for bringing all of these together. Now, there's the workflow, and then there's how it changes for those of us actually doing the work. And so I want to once again tell a story of how I was doing a project that made me realize that data work was going to change pretty substantially. So you'll see up here on the screen a PR on GitHub. It looks like a pretty normal one. This is a PR that was adding 12 semantic models to a project that we were doing shortly after last year's Coalesce. What was different about this than any other DBT code I had written before is that this was the first time I was writing what would become production code using an LLM system. And this was a prototype that we had built that is now being built into the product as part of DBT Copilot to generate semantic models. And I was able to write these 12 semantic models on a deadline in about 20 minutes. And then it took about 15 minutes for Jordan, our domain expert, to validate them. They weren't perfect. There were some changes that we needed to make to them. But after we walked through it, I asked Jordan, I was like, hey, Jordan, how long would it have taken you to write these semantic models from scratch? And he told me it would have taken him about 3 hours. So 3 hours to about half an hour is a pretty good time saving. But that was actually not, to me, the most interesting part of the change here. The thing was, first of all, I'm not an expert in writing semantic models. These days, I'm writing a lot more Notion documents than I am DBT code. But I was able to go and put this together and contribute in a way that let me solve the problem that I needed to solve. And the second was that I was able to just think on a different level. I didn't have to use up my mental space on remembering the exact syntax for how to configure a semantic model. I was able to think about the high-level problems that we needed to solve and get them there. And that was where I realized, I think things are changing again. Because I think that doing data work moving forward is going to look a lot more like this. We're going to be focusing more on systems thinking. We're going to be focusing more on creating best practices. We're going to be spending less time writing individual lines of code. Something that I think is going to be good for many of us here is that means probably a lot less time manually configuring YAML, things like first pass of documentation. That will just be part of the process of using the analytics development lifecycle accelerated by LLMs. And so in the ADLC era, we're still going to be doing the work of building data products, because that's an important part of the ADLC. But our day-to-day focus is going to expand once again. And the focus is going to be on owning and maintaining data systems, on taking the entire lifecycle of our data products from beginning to end and making sure that we are capturing the right elements across each of them. Now, the ADLC is a lot of work. There are a lot of different pieces within it, and we're all already extremely busy. That's one of the things that I'm really excited about in the combination of Gen AI and the ADLC is that Gen AI is actually a necessary component to be able to do all of these things, because it's going to allow us to work faster. It's going to allow us to solve more problems once and then focus on other problems, rather than having to go and configure the same thing again and again and again. So one of the things that comes up most frequently when I talk to people about generative AI is they either think that it's too hot or too cold. I really love this analogy by Packy McCormick, where he talks about the Goldilocks zone for AI. So if AI is too cold, well, it's just not going to be that useful for us. It's not going to be able to accelerate our workflows. It's not going to be able to do that much. If it's too hot, then maybe it does more of our work, and there's actually less for us to do. I don't think that either of those scenarios are that practical. What we have been seeing as LLMs have been rolled out is they obviously are helpful across different tasks within the domain of data work, and that as time goes on, as the models get more powerful, as they get more integrated into our tooling, there are going to be substantial benefits to productivity, to how we're able to engage with data work. At the same time, we're still going to need all of us doing the problem solving, doing the creative work that we have always needed. It's going to be just as important, if not more important, in this era. And so that is, to me, what defines the next era of analytics work. It is, once again, there's a technological unlock, generative AI. There's a new workflow to underlie it. Not the DBT viewpoint this time, but the ADLC. And then, of course, you still use DBT as part of that. For organizations, this is going to mean that you're still going to be building your data products out. You're still going to be running your data transformations. But using the framework of the ADLC, it's going to be part of a system for repeatedly producing value for your organization. We're going to see more organizations adopting the standards of the ADLC so that there's widespread understanding of these best practices. And then getting value from data, it's going to be more widely accessible for more people to interact with data systems, to pull numbers, and to engage with the data that practitioners are making. OK, let's do a real quick look into 3 of the elements of the ADLC and how they might change a little bit. And I encourage everyone to go to Drew's talk later today, where he's going more in depth here. So develop is the bread and butter of much of the work that analytics engineers do. This is writing DBT code. This is writing your transformation. And I'm sure many of you have used Copilot experiences already. Copilots are one of the most well-understood use cases for LLMs at this point. And it's going to be a core part of the DBT experience moving forward. Whether you are asking for a transformation to get built and having the first draft run for you, or I was talking to Joa from Roche the other day, and he was saying, what I really want for my develop is actually for DBT and your AI systems to help me understand the best practices better and figure out how I can actually write better code myself and understand it myself. That is what the LLM integration into the develop part of the ADLC is going to look like. On the testing side, we'll be able to automatically generate first pass of tests. As data systems become more proliferated, and as these systems become even more important to organizations, you're going to need to make sure that your data systems are trustworthy. And having the right tests in there is going to be more important than ever. And using Gen AI tools, as part of Copilot, we have automatic generation of testing as one of our initial use cases. You'll be able to help make sure that the data that you're building is trustworthy and reliable. And then finally, analyze. This is one of the ones that's most personally exciting to me. The systems that we interact with that use LLMs are going to need access to our data. Whether that is a chatbot on Slack where you're able to ask what our revenue was in a region, or if it's actually a much more involved agentic workflow where you are building systems to operate across your business and further build out new workflows, they're going to need to know how to access your business systems, how to access your metrics. Some of you may have seen Juan Ciqueda's talk yesterday, where he talked about investing in semantics and how semantics can be a powerful driver for LLMs. Last year, we ran a replication of an experiment that he did that showed that using semantic layers, you can be 88% more trustworthy in answering natural language questions on data using a semantic layer over text to SQL. Semantic layers let you have all of the value of your ADLC, all of the work that you have done to make this trustworthy, and then it's going to be an interface for LLMs to operate on top of. OK, so a lot here today. I want to leave you with some principles and ways to think about how to engage in an industry that's in the process of moving up the stack. The first is attune to your curiosity. Folks on the developer experience team know that probably the first question I ask them every week is, what has the juice right now? What are you looking at that is capturing your curiosity, that's interesting, but you can't quite explain why, that you think might have a shot of being better than how you're doing it today? No one knows exactly what's going to work in this new world. We don't have all of the rules written yet. And the best way for you to tell is by looking at your organization, looking at what other people are doing, and just seeing what you're curious about, then trying it out. But at the same time, you can't do everything. And there is, particularly when organizations are undergoing, or when industries are undergoing changes like this, there can be a lot of noise. And so you want to focus on outsized wins. Remember, what is hard should become easy. What is impossible should become possible. As you're doing these things, you want to make sure that you're actually radically changing. It doesn't have to be everything, and in fact shouldn't be everything. But the things that you're working on, you should see strong and meaningful improvements, and you should be able to be like, oh yeah, this is it. This is working. And then finally is find a community of kind, obsessive peers that are working through this as well. Look, it's true that none of us know exactly how this next stage of evolution in the industry is going to go. But something that is absolutely true is that all of us together know way more than any of us individually. So whether it's the DBT community Slack, whether it's finding people here, however and wherever you do it, one of the best things that you can do is go and talk to other people that are interested in these same problems, that are solving these same problems. All right, I want to leave us with a final quote from Tristan. This was from the roundup a couple months ago. And it really goes to how we are thinking about this next stage of product development, which is that people are smart and motivated. You are all smart and motivated. And we will not underestimate you as we go into this next stage. And I hope that you are all excited to go and figure out what it actually looks like as we once again move up the stack as an industry. Thanks, folks.